About a month had passed since Mr. Start had taken a spontaneous trip to New Wessex, and construction of his new engine was well underway. Back on his railway, however, progress on the extension to Greymouth had slowed significantly due to the heavy dent in Mr. Start's funds that the new engine had created. Because of this, he had decided to focus his efforts on smaller areas until funds could be reaccumulated. Therefore, Mr. Start had ordered Rab and the workmen to focus their efforts on the half-constructed platform situated between the higher levels of Redwick, ironically called Lower Redwick. Meanwhile, tensions had been running hot between the two opposing sides of the railway's conflict. Though there hadn't been any major arguments breaking out like before, snide remarks and rude comments were still being thrown about the place from both parties whenever they were forced to interact. There was, however, one engine that did not take part in this, one that surprised most of the other engines. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just surprised is all. What's come over you as of late? Nothing, I swear. Really? Nothing. You don't engage in conversations in the shed most nights. Sometimes you even sleep elsewhere. The others have begun to take notice and are coming up with these wild theories of you being up to mischief. So, let them, I don't care. Well, I can see that there's no getting through to you. I've known you for long enough to realize when I've hit the buffers trying to talk to you. Just, you can talk to me whenever you're ready. Don't forget that, alright? Buck hesitated for a moment. It wasn't that he didn't trust Banbury. It was quite the opposite, actually. Banbury had been the only engine who had befriended him when he had first arrived on the railway. The castle had taken pity on the Grange, and had quickly come to find that once you got past his chaotic attitude, he was actually quite a mellow and complex. The only thing Buck had never talked to him about was his past, and that was the only thing he'd hoped would stay buried forever. However, now that he had arrived, that had proven to be impossible. Can I ask you something? Of course. What is it? After all that's happened since last autumn, why do you still talk to me? Banbury was taken aback by this question. Whatever do you mean? Well, it's just... I know you and the other engines all know what's going on between Mr. Start and British Railways. And I know you talk to the engines on both sides, if you will. So you probably already know that I chased down Harthole and almost... well... you know. Clint. Yes, Buck, I do know what happened. And while I don't agree with what you did in the slightest, I do understand that you did what you thought was right. And by the sounds of it, you clearly regret it. Well, yeah, of course I do. But my biggest regret is causing all this to happen by telling Clark about... Never mind. He looked up into the sky for a moment. Then back to Banbury. Why haven't you joined us yet? I'm sorry. Joined us. You know, fighting for Mr. Start's cause? We could really use your help. Banbury thought about this for a moment. I'm going to have to decline, Buck. I see. Can I ask why? To be honest, Buck, I'm not willing to just pick sides and end up throwing away friends I've made over the few years I've been alive. If I end up picking a side, I know it would drastically affect the relationship I share between the engines I would end up opposing. You're not wrong. Ever since the cards were laid out on the table, Russell and Gregory completely changed their attitude towards me. Yes, and that is why I'd rather follow Axel and Levi's lead and refrain from picking a side. Buck shuffled uncomfortably for a moment, but managed to force a smile to his friend. I can respect that. Regardless of what you decide, I've always got your back. Just like you've always done for me. I appreciate that, and know that even though I'm staying neutral, you can always confide in me when something is bothering you, be it related to Mr. Stodd's crusade or not. I promise you, I won't tell a soul. I'm glad. Do you mind if I vent for a bit then? The last year or so has done a number on me. Sure, go right ahead. The two engines settled in as Buck began telling Banbury about everything that had transpired since he found out about Mr. Start's plans. Though he could of course share with the others he was working with, there was something relieving about getting an outside view on everything that had happened.
You wanted to see me, sir?
Yes, indeed.
Ah, I see the organ grinder sent the monkey this time then.
I beg your pardon?
I said what I said. What do you want?
You are in no position to try and be funny with me, 7801. We are not happy with you. And I think you know why.
Oh? Pray tell.
Your task was very simple. We told you to get close to Stodd so we could get the information to deal with him once and for all. It's been months since we set you that task. And we even gave you the prestige of the Refuge Flyer service to sweeten the deal. And yet, you have nothing to show for yourself. You were warned what would happen if this was the case.
With all due respect, for one thing, I never asked to be put on that flyer full time. I asked for something more meaningful, yes, but an express pilot day in and day out was not what I had in mind. Second, surely you can tell that doing an express run to London and back every day isn't going to give me much time to get close to him. I'm too exhausted to do anything once we get back except rest.
Then what do you suggest then? Because the board is very clear. No results, no more leniency.
Well, I do have one suggestion.
Then spit it out. I don't have all evening.
If you want better progress, I can't be on that flyer all the time. So, why not take me off it for a few days? You can pull strings, I'm sure. See if you can get mine and Thornton Manor's duties swapped over. That way I can get closer to Stodd and make some actual progress. You get me?
Very well. I shall speak to the board immediately. I hope you know what you're doing. Or else.
Trust me, I do.
The man turned away and disappeared into the darkness as Anthony Manor made his way back to the sheds. This was just the thing he needed to properly get started on finding out what the ins and outs of Mr. Stodd's operations were. He just hoped Thor wouldn't mind the change of pace for a while. It didn't take long for the arrangements to be made. Mr. Stodd was surprised the next morning when a request came down from the board for a temporary roster change. He obliged, however, and soon enough, Thor was prepared for his first run of the Refuge Flyer. Contrary to Anthony Manor's worries the previous night, he was very excited.
For goodness sake, Thor, calm yourself. You'll cause yourself an embarrassment.
I just can't believe it. Me? Piloting an actual express to London? I've never done it before, yet they actually chose me?
It's like I told you, Thornton. I just needed a little break from it for a while, so I told them that you would be the best engine for the job.
I can't thank you enough, Anthony.
Pleasure's all mine. You're a good lad, Thornton. You deserve the opportunity more than anyone.
Thor beamed with pride.
Plus, I've even spoken with the higher-ups about us doing this more often. You'd better enjoy yourself today, because it may well be just your first run of many.
That would be wonderful. Again, thank you so much. I will never forget this.
Anything for my little brother. You better hurry along and meet up with Richard. We don't want you being late on your first day, do we?
Indeed. I'll see you tonight, everyone.
See you later then. Let me know how it goes.
I will. Goodbye. As Thor left the sheds, Hardhold turned to Anthony Manor.
I'm surprised with you, to be perfectly honest.
What do you mean?
Giving up such a prestigious opportunity? You've never complained about needing time off before. Why would you need it now?
I meant exactly what I said, Hart. Expresses to London and back every day are a little bit more challenging than pottering around here every day with locals, no? A few days off at a time will do the world of good for both me and Thorson.
I see.
A few minutes passed with the two engines sitting in silence. Then, Hart spoke up again.
You know, Anthony, that's not the only thing I'm surprised about with you.
Oh?
With everything that's going on around here, what with Mr. Stodd's little mission to stab British Railways in the back, and all the fools that have sided with him, I'm a bit surprised that you haven't stepped up.
What are you talking about?
We knew something was going on from the night Mr. Stodd saved that pannier and the useless branch. We finally got vindicated, and ever since then, myself and Russell here have actually stepped up to make sure they can't succeed. Yet all this time later, you've remained quiet.
It has been a while since we found out what they were doing, you know. And you were definitely one of the first we told afterwards.
So,
why haven't you come to join us yet? It's only been the four of us against his entire group. We've needed all the help we can get in this fight. This little insider, BR Promise, clearly hasn't pulled their weight because nothing has happened for months. At this point, we need to bolster our own ranks and make sure Mr. Stard knows there's as many of us opposed to his plans as there are those stupid enough to back him.
Look, maybe I haven't yet made my mind up on where I stand with all of this, okay? Yes, I did agree with you that night when we were talking at Colford, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to blindly throw myself into a power struggle without looking at all the facts first.
Are you serious? The facts have been out in the open for ages, Anthony. If you haven't made up your mind by now, you haven't been paying attention.
I, for one, still think there's more to this than any of us really know. Plus, I haven't exactly had much time to really see for myself, have I? If you want to look for others to bolster your cause, then you'll have to look elsewhere for now, I'm afraid. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to take Fulton's first train out. Good day.
And with that, Anthony Manor left the sheds. He would have been more than happy to tell Hart the truth right then and there, but he knew that the higher-ups at British Railways were keeping his involvement as secret as possible. Hart and Russell, meanwhile, were dumbfounded.
Well, that didn't go as well as you hoped, did it?
Indeed. I'm very disappointed in him. I thought I knew him better than that.
So what's the plan now then? Are you serious about wanting to get others involved with us?
Yes, Russell. I think the time has come to build up more support before Mr. Stard sinks his claws into anyone else on this line.
So who did you have in mind? I know for a fact Levi and Axel are out of the question. Banbury's one we could ask, and Thor.
It wouldn't hurt to ask, but I'm not sure that we can rely on Thor too much. He seems to either be oblivious to what's going on, or he's purposefully ignoring it all.
Then that only leaves...
Of course. He'd be perfect. We have to find him as soon as possible.
It didn't take long for the pair to make their move. That afternoon, Hart and Russell made their way down to Manifil, and there in the sheds sat the very engine they were looking for.
Ah, Pat! Just the engine we wanted to see.
Pat was taken a bit by surprise at the sudden interest towards him by Hart Hall. Though he had been accepted as a member of the fleet by most of his co-workers, there were still some who seemed to hold resentment towards him due to the rivalry their companies once had. Hart Hall had been one of those engines, which made this interaction all the more strange.
Is that right? Whatever for?
Well, you see, you have probably noticed the ongoing struggle that has befallen our quaint little railway as of late. How we have shown some animosity towards a certain group of engines since the end of last year.
The fact of the matter is that those delinquents are trying to chase us and British Railways away by any means necessary, be that sabotage, delays, or directly harming their fellow engines. It's simply unacceptable.
Yeah, I won't lie. Some of us are afraid we'll end up off the rails just because we won't bend to their will.
And not to mention his attempt to build a false image as the good guy by restoring useless branch lines, buying and restoring out-of-date engines, and that hopeless plan of his to create a goods branch.
He paused to let the Midlander process what he'd just said, then continued.
The point being, my dear engine, is that if us honest workers stand together against the horrid actions of Mr. Stard and find out what he truly wants to accomplish, we can get him fired once and for all. So what do you think, Pat? Will you join us in our fight to prove the glory of British Railways?
I'm not interested.
That...
Not a word.
Whilst Hart and Russell were scurrying away to tend to their bruised egos, Anthony Manor was preparing himself for the beginning of his task. He was pulling into the station at Redwick with Thor's local when he saw Mr. Start at the station platform, chatting up the kiosk girls for the 4th time that week.
Excuse me, Mr. Stard, sir.
Oh, hello, Anthony. What's up?
I need to speak to you about something. Can we go somewhere a bit more private?
Well, I'd say come into my office, but I think you're too fat to fit in through the door. Why don't you get turned around and meet me at the carriage sheds?
Of course, sir.
As the two began to make their separate ways over, Mr. Stard was taken aback. Anthony Manor had never sought him out directly before, and with this coming off the back of the roster change that morning, he wondered what could possibly be going on. Whatever he was thinking, however, he was not prepared for what the Manor had in store. Later that night, in the sheds at Redwick, the lads were resting after a long day of work. Ramsay in particular was feeling exhausted, having been delayed on his way back from Hinksey Yard due to a points failure and having to try and make up for lost time. You know, at the speed you were going, I thought you were going to pull a buck at Manifel.
Yeah, that was a bit of a sketchy crossover, but to be fair, I probably managed to shave off 3 minutes by not slowing down. I can kind of see why you do it now, Buck.
Buck looked up towards Ramsay, snapping him out of his deep thoughts. Oh, right, yeah. Sounds like a good idea.
You zoned out again, didn't you?
No?
Then what was I saying before?
That not all the Nazi, Soviet, or Yank submarines have returned after the war ended?
Oh, for the love of no, you moron! The fact that he overheard Russell and Hart trying to sweet-talk Pat into their ranks. We talked about that for an hour.
Yeah, and like I said, he completely blew him off, which is why I think we should have a word with him like Clint and Darius did with Axel and Levi a few months back.
Buck once again looked a bit uncomfortable and didn't respond. Darius took notice. Okay, seriously, are you alright, Buck? We've been noticing you changed in attitude as of late.
Yeah, mate, so something happened.
I'm fine. Stop asking about it.
Oh, don't be like that, chum. Go on, give us the goss.
Buck was about to snap back, but they were suddenly interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Stard. Evening all? What's going on here then? Nothing much, sir. We were just trying to figure out what to do about Pat after he got cornered by Hart and Russell earlier. Yes, we decided to talk to him and, find out where he stands in all of this. I see. Yeah, you guys should get on that sooner rather than later. The others eyed up Buck, a bit miffed that once again he managed to deflect the topic. Mr. Stard continued. So anyways, on that topic, I do come bearing some good news to you lot.
Oh? Did King Richard get blown up by an undetonated bombshell on his way back from London?
As much of a blessing that would be, no.
Hey, one can hope.
Anyways, back on topic. I am delighted to inform you that you will all be getting some more help forwards. More help, sir?
You haven't brought on another engine, have you, sir? For once, I feel that we aren't understaffed. So will that really be necessary?
No, you dolt. I meant with the takeover. I've got another engine in on the plan.
Oh, let me guess, is it Banbury?
Nope, Pat. Swing and a miss.
4?
Close.
What do you mean, close?
Hold on a minute. You don't mean...
Just then, Anthony Manor backed into the sheds. The engines looked a bit taken aback when they realized who it was, with Ramsay holding the biggest frown of them all. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to our latest recruit. He approached me earlier and made his case on why he wants to join us, mostly offering to keep an eye on King Richard whenever they're together on the flyer. I trust you will give him a warm welcome. Ramsay, however, decided to address what was on everyone's minds.
Pardon me, sir, and no offence meant. Sir, but are you bloody insane?
I'm sorry? What did you just say?
He's one of them. He's one of the British Railways mob.
What do you mean?
Don't you remember? The night after you brought the Eastward branch and saved Virgil, I heard him talking about us with Hart Hall when I was taking the post train. He's been one of them since the start. And then when Hart started bad-mouthing Buck for standing up to him about Virgil, he was right there, joining in with them. I saw it with my own eyes.
Yes, sir, surely you aren't falling for this. One of them suddenly decides they want to join us. You'd have to be right thick to believe that.
Is this true, Anthony Manor? Anthony Manor was quiet for a moment. He did not look angry, or even hurt by the accusations. Indeed, he remained quite expressionless, even as Mr. Start and everyone in the sheds glared at him.
I had a feeling this was going to come up.
See, he's not even denying it.
I haven't finished yet. Yes, sir. It's true that Radnor
It's Ramsay.
saw me talking with Hart Hall that night. But, if I may, do you remember anything I actually said as you were passing that night?
Sure, Hart was banging on about being stuck with no proof and keeping an eye on us and you.
But Ramsay suddenly faltered. While he had definitely heard Hart's part of the conversation as he paused, He had not heard Anthony Manor say anything prior to or after. Fortunately for the manor, Ramsay had not been within earshot as he had spoken that night. Well, Ramsay?
I didn't actually hear anything from you.
I would think not. Yes, the topic of the branch came up, and why wouldn't it? You saved a branch line and an engine from scrap, that's hardly insignificant. And yes, Hart was convinced that something nefarious was going on. He's been banging on about it ever since that night we were both thrown out of the sheds. But I didn't agree with it. I agreed that it was a little strange, but for the most part I just sat there and listened to him rant about it. I didn't have much choice in the matter.
And how do we know you're not just saying this to worm your way out of trouble?
I can only tell you what I know, and you can only go by that and what you heard.
Alright, if that's true, then what about what Ramsay says about you slagging Buck off?
Well, again, I ask you to think back to when that happened, Radnor,
Again, it's Ramsay.
and think about who actually said what that day.
Ramsay thought back to the day in question. And sure enough, he remembered Hart ranting on about Buck, and Russell had been the one joining in on the bad mouthing, not Anthony. In fact, he hadn't said a word at all.
And I'll just point out as well that everyone's known what you've been doing for months now. You've had that lot hounding you at every turn about it, but have I said anything? No. I may not talk to you all often, but that doesn't mean I'm one of them.
As Anthony Manor finished, everyone turned to stare at Ramsay. He sat there in silence for a bit, deep in thought. Well, got anything to say, Ramsay?
I guess, well, okay, maybe I was wrong. But I'm still skeptical about this. Something feels off.
Well, that's on you. If me telling the truth isn't enough to convince you, then I don't know what will.
Well, you've convinced me, that's for sure. Besides, if you hadn't, I would have turned you into a septic tank for trying to cross me. Anthony Manor rolled his eyes as Mr. Stark continued. Tell you what, why don't you tag along with Ramsay tomorrow and have a word with Pat to see where he stands in all of this, and to see if you can sway his opinion? Ramsay shot a suspicious look to Anthony Manor, before sighing.
Very well, sir.
There's a good engine. Now, I'm running late for my happy ending massage. I'll see you a lot later.
Gross.
Mr. Stark walked away from the sheds, leaving a confused Anthony Manor behind.
Is he always that bad with you lots?
Nah fam, it's just Mr. Stard, innit?
Don't worry about it, you get used to it after a while.
I see.
Anyways, we will talk further on this matter tomorrow. Now as for you, Buck, what was that earlier?
But when he looked over to the shed road Buck was in, he found that the Grange had moved to the back of the sheds, seemingly asleep.
Of course.
What's wrong with him?
That's what we're wondering.
Well, no point waking him now. Guess I'll have to try again another time.
I guess so.
It wasn't long before the engines said their goodnights, and one by one, they all drifted off to sleep. All except Buck, who had only pretended to be asleep. He sighed to himself as he looked up at the ceiling of the sheds. He had a feeling it was going to be another long and sleepless night. The next day went by at a fast rate. The news about the addition of Anthony Manor to Mrs. Starr's cause had spread quickly to all the others involved. Some were surprised, but happy to have another engine willing to lend a buffer to their plans. Others, however, were in the same boat as Ramsay. Though they didn't have any concrete evidence against him, something just felt a bit off about their latest recruit. On the other hand, there was the case of trying to figure out what was going on with Bucklery Grange. Throughout the day, a few of the engines had tried to engage in conversation with him, but to no avail. He would simply move away or ignore them altogether. The engines were confused as to what was on the mixed traffic engine's mind that caused him to act so cold and blunt. But with Buck being so unwilling to cooperate, the answer seemed impossible to get. This would plague Ramsay's mind as he and Anthony Manor were sat in the sheds at Colford later that day, with the county deciding to test the waters with the manor, as he still didn't trust him fully.
I can't figure out what his problem is. It's so obvious that something is up.
What does it matter? He's not hurting anyone, is he? If anything, he's keeping himself out of trouble for a change, which is a good thing if you ask me.
No one is complaining about his improved track record. It's the fact he's been so moody lately.
Well, yes, it's been quite obvious that he's been more quiet and sheltered recently. But have any of you lot ever considered he might not be ready to open up yet? And that you and the others' constant pestering of him might be making it a bit difficult for him to open up to you lot?
Wait, what? How does that make sense?
Well, think about it for a moment. How would you feel if you were insecure about something, and everyone you knew tried to force it out of you at every opportunity? Maybe if you leave him to face his own dealings first, he'll be more open to tell you about what's on his mind.
Ramsay looked stunned for a moment.
Are you alright?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. But when you put it like that, it's obvious. Don't know how I could miss it. It's exactly what I...
But before Ramsay could continue their conversation, the familiar sound of a Midland whistle drifted through the air.
Okay, here he comes. Remember, keep it casual.
Same to you.
Oh.
Soon enough, Pat became visible in the distance as he reversed towards the sheds. He came to a stop between the two engines.
Afternoon, chaps. How goes it? Good, thank you.
Same here. How are you today, Pat?
I'm doing pretty good. Me and Jess just took a small freight up to Spear for Clint after his injector failed. Really now? British Railways let you do that even though it's a private line? Well, no, not exactly. I'm off the roster for another 2 hours, so I offered to take it in his place. And I'm glad I did. It's a beautiful line.
So I've heard. These smaller engines are lucky to be able to go up there. I always wanted to take a trip up there.
Well, what's stopping you? Weight restrictions on the bridge, I assume. Ah.
Yeah, but it's fine. I'll just have to make do with the main stretch of the line.
The engines fell silent for a moment, before Ramsay spoke up again.
Say, Pat, I've got something I wanted to ask you.
Pat looked over.
Sure thing, what's up?
Well, it's just that we heard from Riley you got hounded by Hart and Russell at Manifell yesterday, and I wanted to check if you're alright.
Oh, that. There's nothing to be worried about. I'm fine.
If you don't mind me asking, mate, what exactly happened?
Well, to be quite honest, it felt like they were only acting nice to me to try and sweet-talk me into joining their side in this little back-and-forth thing you've got going on. I just told them I wasn't interested and left. How come? Same reason I haven't come forward wanting to get involved in Mr. Starr's plans. All this fighting between you all, it's just not something I can get behind.
I can get behind that, I suppose. Axel and Levi have been on the same wavelength. They've got friends on both sides and they don't want to ruin things between any of them. Is that the case for you as well?
Not exactly. I can't say I've ever been on good terms with any of them. They don't like me because of my Midland background. No, I just can't bring myself to turn against either side. I'd be betraying those who got me to where I am now. What do you mean? I've never told any of you where I was before I came here, have I?
I'd have figured you were racing around up north on Midlands somewhere.
Well, I was doing that once upon a time. Great times back then. But unfortunately, circumstances caught up with me.
Ramsay listened with interest. He'd never heard Pat talk like this before.
I'm one of hundreds of my kind, you see. So you can imagine that even with how big my home region is, it could be difficult to find work for all of us. It was fine when we first started, double-ups were our way after all. But once the bigger engines started arriving, things started drying up. After the war, they decided that I was surplus to requirements and laid me up at the back of my home shed. They kept me around for emergencies, but it was hardly worth keeping me for. Heck, most of the time they seemed to forget I was even still there.
Surely they didn't keep you there for that long?
Years. Why do you think I showed up here still in my LMS colours? Not even nationalisation brought about any change. It got to the point where I thought I was done and one day I'd just simply be dragged off to meet my maker. But then some men from British Railways came to see me. It's been about a year ago now. They told me they needed an engine to come down here and they specifically wanted me for the job.
Well, they only did that so they could trick Mr. Starr into thinking he got Caerphilly Castle.
Don't bloody remind me.
I know this now, of course, but frankly, I don't care. They gave me a second chance. An opportunity to work I thought I'd never see again. Whatever their reasons for doing so, I owe them that until the day I go cold for good.
But if that's the case, Pat, why aren't you siding with the British Railways here? They've clearly done more for you than any of us.
Because Mr. Starr's the one who chose to keep me. I know he wasn't best pleased with me coming here instead of that castle. He could have sent me back, told him to stick me where the sun didn't shine and moved on. But he didn't. And now here I am, with a nice home, a good job on the post run, and of course, Jess for company wherever I go. He and BR both saved me. They brought me back from the brink. If I was to join one side or the other in this little fight of yours, I'd be betraying my debt to one or the other. That's quite touching, really.
I can't believe you've kept that to yourself all this time, Pat.
Well, I don't like to dwell on it. It's in the past, and it won't do anyone any good to let it fester. It taught me to appreciate every day as it comes. None of us know when our time will be up, so it's best to just live for the present, you know?
I understand, mate. I have to be honest with you, Pat. When we heard from Riley that you rejected Hart and Russell yesterday, we thought we had a golden opportunity to get you on our side in all of this. But after hearing what you've just said here today, it'd be wrong of me to even attempt to sway your mind. Honestly, I'm just happy that you haven't been suckered into joining King Richard in his coronage. But seriously, Pat, know that even though you're staying neutral, we won't treat you any different. You're our friend after all.
Thank you, Vandy. And can I please just ask you both to keep this between yourselves? Like I said, I don't like bringing it like that.
Of course, mate. You're on so safe. Right, Anthony? Anthony! Hello! Earth to Anthony.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course.
You alright there?
Yes, sorry. Zoned out for a moment there. Anyways, chaps, it's been lovely, but I'm afraid I have to get down to Manila for my next service now.
Alright, mate. Take care.
But Anthony didn't reply as he moved forwards. His mind was on something else, or rather, someone else. He just hoped it wouldn't be too late to get through to them. Having hurried his way down to the roundhouse at Manifel, he was surprised to find it completely empty. Thinking fast, he got turned around to get a better view of his surroundings, and sure enough, he spotted who he was looking for. Making his way slowly towards the older shed, he could see the clearly heard expression that crossed Gregory's smokebox, and as he got closer, Gregory spoke up in an angry tone.
Go away. I'm not in the mood.
Gregory, please, just let me explain things before...
Explain things? What is there to say? I saw you up there, hanging about with the enemy. I bet you and that Git Ramsey were trying to sway Pat to your side after he blew off Hart.
If you just allow me to explain myself...
No, I don't care. Do you not remember what they put me through? All the embarrassment simply for being a standard design. I thought we were friends.
We are friends, Gregory. Look, nothing's changed. I want to tell you what's been going on, I really do, but I can't.
Of course you can't. You're hanging with Stard and his lot. Hang about. Why are you mingling with Mr. Stard? You hate that guy. You've always told me you wanted him gone. What on earth would you gain from working with him and his lackeys? Unless...
Anthony looked around uncomfortably.
Wait a minute. No way. It's you, isn't it? You're the engine spying on them for that bloke from British Railways.
Shh! Not out here. Inside. Now.
Looking around to make sure nobody heard them, Anthony shoved Gregory inside the shed where no one would see them. Resigned to the fact that he had been rumbled, he began to explain everything from the beginning. The standard's anger quickly subsided, giving way to awe.
And you've seriously been keeping this quiet for all this time? Even to me? Again, I thought we were meant to be friends. Tell each other everything and all that.
They told me I couldn't tell anyone else. The fewer who know, the better this works. That's their way of thinking, at least. And that's why I need you to promise me that this stays between us.
Between us? Surely if we let the others know about this, it'd be easier to coordinate our efforts to combat theirs.
Absolutely not. None of you have done yourselves any favours since we first found out about their little scheme. Why do you think they came to me in the first place? You've been running your mouths off to them at the slightest provocation, especially Hart. If one of those idiots finds out, it's only a matter of time before it's game over. No, this conversation cannot leave this shed. Please, Gregory.
Gregory heard the earnestness in his friend's voice.
Oh, alright, fine.
Thanks, Gregory. I owe you one big time.
But you've got to be more careful. If I manage to work it out, the others will do it easily if they catch you.
I know.
Mingling with that treacherous lot, though, it must be hell for you.
Definitely. Frankly, it makes me sick to the tubes listening to them talk about you, and even that lot. Half of them say they want you all scrapped. It's that wretch of a manager. He's got them all wrapped up under his little spell. If this pays off, I'll tell you this much. It'll be the happiest moment of my life, watching him lose it all.
Aye, you and me both. Can I ask you something?
Of course.
Why did you agree to all of this?
Honestly, in part, I'm doing this for you. Yes, I hate Stard for what he did to me, but I'd have gotten on just fine avoiding him and getting out when I got the chance. But once I found out what him and his lackeys did to you, I knew I could stand by no longer. What Stard made his engines do to you is a crime against all engines on the network. So long as he holds a position of power, no one is safe. And that's why I have to do this, before he kills us all.
There was a short pause before he spoke again.
Right, I'm afraid I have to get going now, but I hope this has cleared up any misunderstandings.
Aye, it did, and I'm sorry for our snap to you, all that. You're a good friend, Anthony.
Don't mention it, Gregory. I understand. I'll see you soon.
Okay, here he comes. Remember, keep it casual.
I'm literally going to be talking to myself.
Oh.
Afternoon, chaps. How goes it? Get lost. Okay, bye!